webinar series along with Dr. Marta Desmond. I would like to welcome you to the 10th webinar of our webinar series targeting grantsmanship and preparing for the NSF HSI call due in September. Today's topic is listen to our experts, provide advice on working with your sponsor, program officer, and NSF Fastlane. We have over 300 participants from across the country registered in today's webinar. A little bit of housekeeping. The webinar will last 1 hour. Today's webinar has 3 speakers, and we anticipate from 15 to 20 minutes for questions at the end of the presentations. All questions related to the topic, please submit them via writing in the chatting in the question and answer box. All questions related to to Zoom or other technical questions, submit them in the chatting box. So again, the question and answer box is for questions related to the topic, and technical questions are going to be sent to the chat box. We have Edmundo Medina dedicated to monitor the technical questions, and we have Nicolas Mendez in social media. There is also a team, an NMSU team consisting of Dr. Marta Desmond, Dr. Margie Vela, our program manager, and myself, curating questions and reading them at the end of the presentations. We might not have enough time to answer all of the questions. However, you will find the answers to the questions in our portal. You need to become a member of our network, HSI network, in order to take a look at the questions and also the presentations. This webinar is being recorded, and you will have access to the webinar as long as you become a member of our network. Edmundo Medina will post that link to the network and how to join the network in the chatting box. At the end of the presentations, you will receive an email with a very short survey monkey from Dr. Cristina Velez. And we really appreciate that you take your time to answer the questions, because this feedback is extremely important for us, as well as the data is important to include it in our NSF reporting as and also report, not only to do the report, but also to measure our program outcomes. There is an incentive of $15 Amazon gift card for people who actually complete the surveys. The name will be entered in a drawing, and every week we will announce the winner of the Amazon gift card. This week we have a winner, and the winner is Miss Tagata Devnath. And she will be receiving an electronic email within 2 weeks with the gift card. It is my great pleasure to introduce our speakers this afternoon. The first speaker is Dr. Hamid Mansouri Rad, who is a Senior Proposal Development Specialist at NMSU Research Administration Services. Since joining the office in 2007, he has contributed to the development of a number of large interdisciplinary and multi-institutional proposals to federal entities such as the National Science Foundation, DOD, DOE, and USAID. In addition to coordination and comprehensive review of proposal for compliance and responsiveness to requirements and review criteria, Hamid writes non-technical sections of proposals such as the management plan, institutional capacities, and broader impacts. Our second speaker is Ms. Rita Parra. She is a director of pre-award administration at New Mexico State University Research Administration Services. Rita has been in research administration for 20 years and has a depth of experience in pre-award, award negotiation, and account setup. She considers customer service as the heart of the research administration and strives to minimize the administrative burden from principal investigators. Our third speaker is Ms. Barbara Gonzalez, who is the Associate Director for the Pre-Award Administration in the Research Administration Services at NMSU. She has a bachelor's degree in business administration with a concentration in leadership from NMSU. She brings a variety of experience in contracts in both private and public sectors. Barbara enjoys joining together all her experience to NMSU to assist colleges and the whole university and principal investigators in creating, negotiating, and implementing grants and contracts. Please welcome the three speakers today, and we really appreciate that you join us this afternoon. Please, Dr. Hamid, go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Valles Rosales, and thank you so much, Dr. Martha Desmond, for giving us this opportunity. And thank everybody else who's been involved in organizing this event. We really appreciate it. As Dr. Valles Rosales mentioned, so I've been here at NMSU for a long time, and I'm a proposal development specialist. And what we do is, we help faculty with their research proposals. So basically, we get involved in various stages of proposals from the very beginning when they are developing their concept, throughout when they want to submit. We assist them. So sometimes we help them with, if these are large interdisciplinary institutional proposals, we help them with managing and coordinating these proposals. Sometimes we assist them with just development of the proposal. Sometimes we offer comprehensive review of proposals in terms of compliance and argumentation and language, and we edit. So we don't get involved in budgets. So I'm no budget expert. However, working on these large proposals, I can say that I've seen a lot of. So we at NMSU are very organized, but we work with other universities, and I'll see that there are a lot of opportunities to improve the quality of proposals in terms of budget, so that a lot of disruptions don't happen. So what I see is that a proposal starts moving along towards the deadline, and then the last week, the PI determines that they need to revise the budget. So all of a sudden, people who've been involved in developing the budget, they need to redo their budgets. Not only that, now this adjustment is going to require modifications in the narrative of the proposal, in the budget justification of the proposal, in management plan, in research plan. So if there is one thing that I can add to this discussion about budgets, is that I recommend PIs to be very organized from the very beginning when the solicitation is released and they start developing their concept. Actually, this is a very simplified proposal development process. So you start positioning yourself before the solicitation is released. And in theory, once the solicitation is released, you start developing your concept. But in reality, what I urge everybody is to do is, for example, if you already have a concept in mind, you should already be looking into that program, for example, that NSF program that funds this kind of concept, to monitor that program and see what's been funded before, and you already have that concept in your mind. And then, so once the solicitation is released, you're just doing some minor adjustments to your concept. But, so this is where, by the way, these, green, blue, pink, and red, they represent kind of the review process that we do for large proposals. There is a green review, there is a blue team review, there is a pink team review, green team, red team review and white team review. But so what I'm saying is that, so here in theory, you are going to your research administration office and say, okay, I have a proposal. I need somebody to help me with developing the budget, right? So my argument is that before you even go to your budget experts, you do your own studies of the solicitation yourself and kind of determine, estimate what is the funding level, understand what the funding level is available to you, and understand the budget you're proposing for this concept, and be sure that if you're exceeding the budget limit or you're close to the budget limit, to the funding level, adjust it, make the necessary adjustments. Always make sure to let funding level determine the scope of your proposal from the very beginning. Okay, don't move on with your proposal to up to here and then all of a sudden you realize, okay, so I need to revise my budget. Sometimes it causes embarrassment. You've talked to a lot of collaborators in other universities. Now you have to go back to them and say, sorry, we don't have budget for this section. We can't collaborate with you, right? So that's my only advice. And here is a very hypothetical project concept. Okay, let's imagine that for example, you're submitting to NSF Advancing Informal STEM Learning. That's a program that I'm expecting to be released this year as well. It's been going since 2017. But let's say that this is about STEM education, informal STEM education, and you have this super duper idea that you have this idea to create this this curriculum or this, for example, technology-based intervention about STEM learning, STEM education that is informed or grounded in a social model that is grounded in social variables such as, for example, cultural aspects of learning, environmental aspects of learning, socioeconomic variables of the students, and maybe cognitive, how students learn. And you have come up with this idea that this informal learning environment requires such a model. And you're very excited about it, and you're like, I am going to submit this, and we are going to monitor it, and we are going to adjust it, we're going to evaluate it, and then make modifications. And then, so it's all good. However, let's look at the same model with the budget or funding in mind. So what do you need to make this happen? So first you need a social scientist, you need a computer scientist, you need a multimedia design expert. You can't coordinate this whole proposal by yourself. You need a project coordinator. And then these computer scientists, they are not going to get engaged in developing the model themselves. So they probably need to hire a graduate student. This involves surveys and interviews. So you need a graduate student here to do conduct the surveys and interviews. You need somebody to do the evaluation in classroom and make the modifications. You need a graduate student. So just even before going to the budget people, you can estimate that this is going to require $400,000 a year, right? So let's assume that only $300,000 is available. So right then and there, you realize you have to make some adjustments to this model. Okay, so you probably cannot move along with your project coordinator. You realize that, well, you need your computer scientist, you need your social scientist, you need your multimedia design expert. You probably are thinking, well, I'm going to ask them to do the work themselves, not hire graduate students, for example, right? Or you might realize, if the funding is even less, you might realize, well, maybe instead of covering all these variables, I can only focus on two two of these variables at this stage of the research, and hopefully in the next funding cycle, you can expand upon it. So this is what I'm saying about having a clear idea of your concept with the budget in mind before you move on with your developing your budget. And then this way you're not taking as much time of the budget experts. Realize that in these offices they are supporting multiple proposals. At NMSU, for example, we are submitting, I don't know, hundreds of proposals. So imagine if every budget person has to be engaged in manipulating budget throughout this proposal cycle. Imagine the kind of the hectic environment that this is going to create, right? So, and again, I mean, study the RFP, the solicitation, and do your own homework. If cost share is required, contact or read the FAQs, contact the project, the program manager, and ask, is personnel time allowed to satisfy the cost share? Is the use of existing equipment or facilities allowed? If not, develop an effective pitch highlighting the significance of the effort, the contribution to groups, institutions, regions, or the nation. Provide evidence, data, letters, because basically you are going to the administration and asking for cost share. If you cannot satisfy this requirement, you may not even move forward with your proposal, right? And you want to obtain buy-in or support from peer researchers, from department heads, from stakeholders. Explore possible support from private sources, from foundations, and discuss your plans with your associate dean for research. So these are the things you want to do before you start getting engaged in budget discussions. You want to move forward very clear and do as much as possible yourself. And if you have any questions, I'll be available at the end of this presentation. Thank you so much. Ms. Rita, I can advance the slides for you whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Hamid. That'd be great. Thank you, everyone, for having us here today. We're very excited to be here and discuss proposal submissions in general, but also NSF. One of the things that I think about when I think of new or faculty who may not be very experienced with submitting proposals, externally sponsored projects in general, is that it's a good idea for you to go and introduce yourself to the research administrators that you'll be working with, either in your college and at your central administrative office for grants and contracts. They want to help you be successful. They want to see your proposals be funded, because I'm going to turn up my mic.
We can hear you well. I can hear you well.
Great. Because your success is their success as well. So schedule an appointment with them. They would love to meet you. If you're new to the university, they would love to work with you one-on-one to get to know you and what your interests are. Schedule an appointment with them and see how the proposal process works at your particular institution. For example, are there any type of internal forms that are required by your department or your university when you start the proposal process? Ask about internal deadlines. Do they have a structure for submitting certain components of the proposal? Being a research administrator, getting that budget and that budget justification is very important to me. I want to know that that is completely wrapped up. I want to know that we're ready to go, that we're situated and everything has been clearly outlined in the budget and we're meeting the criteria of the solicitation or the RFP. Ask if there's a due date to have your final proposal documents submitted. Most universities have a 1 to 2 week submission requirement to have all of your final documents. At New Mexico State, we have a 5 working day deadline. We request that if it's a large proposal, if it's a complex proposal, if it's being submitted through grants.gov, FastLane, Assist, that we receive all proposal documents 5 working days in advance. That's not a hard and fast rule because things happen, life happens, but that actually gives us the best opportunity to be able to upload your documents, review what we need to, and submit in advance of the deadline. If you feel that you're going to need assistance with the budget, schedule an appointment, either at your college office for grants and contracts or the central admin if you don't have that type of support in your college. Ask your questions, discuss any concerns you might have over the budget. Read your solicitation or your RFP thoroughly. That RFP, that budget, that solicitation is your Bible for the submission of that proposal. So in general, starting with this first slide, proposal preparation and submission, proposals have 3 general areas. The technical section, which is your expertise, the management section, which answers questions regarding who will do the work. Does the university have the facilities and the infrastructure that's required? Will there be subcontractors in place for completing the project? The cost section, who will pay for what? Are the costs reasonable and allocable? Next slide. Successful proposal submissions begin the process early. They have all their bases covered from the start. There's regular communication with all partners, your department, your co-PIs, collaborators at other institutions, your central administrative office, and the proposal is submitted well before the deadline. One of the things that I can recall is attending a grant workshop, and the speaker asked by show of hands who were PIs in the audience. And he asked, how far in advance do you start working on your proposal? Let's say 2 months. And he raised his hand. Well, nobody in the audience raised their hand. And he said, okay. He says, what about 6 weeks? Still no hands. 4 weeks. There were a few hands that went up. 2 weeks. And that's when most of the hands went up. So his point was, what you put into this process is what you're going to take away from the process. A rushed proposal is never a good thing. Rushing to the deadline, starting late, submitting it to your research administrators the day that it's due. It's never a good thing. We know that life happens. At my institution, we do not turn away anyone. If we have the capacity to do it, we're going to try as hard as we can to get that proposal submitted. But what is put into that proposal comes out of that proposal. Just something to keep in mind. Sponsored award costs are broken up in 2 ways as far as charging expenses: direct costs and indirect costs. Next slide, please. So direct costs, as defined by Uniform Guidance 2 CFR 200, are those costs that can specifically be identified to a cost objective with relative ease and a high degree of accuracy. Next slide, please. Examples of direct costs: salary and fringe benefits, non-office supplies, subcontracts, project-related travel. It's always a very good idea to be able to define clearly all of the costs in your budget. Most sponsors, if they like your proposal, they're going to want to fund it. But if there's any questions about your budget justification, they'll come back and they'll ask you for that clarification prior to making that award. So if you can ensure that your budget and your budget narrative is nice and tight and well defined at the proposal submission stage, then less chance for questions when they're ready to award you. Next slide, please. Facility and administrative costs. Actually, I think I'm taking Barbara's slide. So I'm going to stop there. However, I did want to leave you with this. Attend trainings. Most universities, departments have trainings and webinars. Most sponsored projects, sponsored as far as the federal agencies, they have webinars and trainings that are in place. Your research administrators would be happy to help you get on that webinar. We've had many PIs come in when there's an NSF webinar. They come and they watch with us, take notes. We talk about things as a group. So attend any trainings and webinars as your time permits. We understand that you're very busy. You have many things that are going on with teaching and research and your project reports, etc. But it's good to know what's happening at the federal level with sponsors. Another good idea is that you can contact the program officer for the solicitation that you're interested in. Program officers, just like your research administrators, they want to see you succeed. They want to help you to obtain that proposal, to obtain that funding, and to be successful. Usually within your solicitation or your RFP, you are going to find the program officer's name, email, and phone number. Reach out to them, talk to them about your idea, your concept, see if it's a good fit for this particular solicitation that you're interested in. Also, one thing that might be helpful for folks who are new to this process is making sure you're aware of conflict of interest. Conflict of interest is research where it appears the PI may have a significant financial interest that could directly or indirectly affect the design, conduct, or reporting of the research activities, or where the PI's situation could directly and significantly compromise his or her professional commitments to the university. Some of those conflicts of interest that I would be interested in knowing about is anything that would appear to be a conflict. Say, for example, you're submitting to Chevron and your wife, your spouse works at Chevron. We would want to know that. Anything that would appear to be a conflict, anything that would provide that little wiggle room of questions. So what you can do, I'm sure that every person here, their university has a conflict of interest policy. Contact your research administrator, either at your college level, your research center, or your administrative central level. Self-disclose, talk to somebody. It's better to have that information out there rather than allowing for something to be brought to light after the fact. Transparency is always a very good idea. So I'm going to wrap up my slides and Ms. Barbara is next.
Thank you, Rita. So moving on to the other class, we did we wanted to start looking at facility and administrative costs, F&A. We also probably have all heard it as overhead or IDC or indirect costs. So the OMB Uniform Guidance to CFR 200 defines it as costs that are incurred for common or joint objectives and therefore cannot be identified readily and specifically with a particular sponsored project, an instructional activity, or any other institutional activity. So go ahead and next slide, Hami. So for some examples, there's operation and maintenance of buildings, advertisement costs, administrative office supplies. So essentially, if you cannot tie it directly to your statement of work or anything that is going to provide a deliverable for your proposal, again, maintenance or administration, you want to put that under, that's covered under your F&A and or IDC costs or your rate that your university or institution has. Next slide. So let's get directly to the NSF budgets. We want to, of course, make sure that you want to adhere to your solicitation, your RFP, the minimum and the maximum. Sometimes if they see just that final budget number and it's not in your solicitation, that's not even going to be looked at. So we want to make sure that we focus on making sure we're able to meet those expectations. You want to always make sure your expenses are allowable, eligible, reasonable, and necessary for the scope of the project. Again, where you reference you to the OMB to CFR 200. Essentially, if you're not familiar with it, or if you want to know and have questions about if it would be allowable or eligible, again, use your resources. You can utilize your research center, your administration center. We also have fiscal monitors, research accountants, and of course, just anybody that would be more familiar with this type of information or OMB. You also can look it up online, but utilize all your resources that you have to make sure that you're going to honor the allowable and eligible process. And also ensure no unallowable expenses per the solicitation. So sometimes the solicitation will direct you that there will be no capitalized equipment allowed, or make sure some are included, like conference travel. You want to try and think perfect world as long as you're going to meet the budget. So do you want to, are there conferences? Make sure you include per diem, make sure you include gas, all of that in regards to your travel. That's why we do what you'll constantly hear us talk about starting early, because even with the budget, you've got to remember everything, just like when you're planning. And when you're planning, you got to kind of consider all costs involved. So with your proposal, it would be the same. Next slide. Make sure that you're aware that PI and co-PI salary cannot be more than 2 summer months. Make sure your fringe rates and F&A rates are current. So get with the appropriate people, your accounting office, your research accountants, get the correct rates, the updated rates. If you guys work with the O&R, get your statement. Ensure expenses are based on actual quotes, past purchases, or per diem. So that's always good to have. Obviously, again, it goes back to starting early, is making sure you can receive quotes, making sure you can, have some time to do your research and move forward and looking out, like kind of projecting and forecasting, and maybe what it would be later on down the road when you get awarded, should you get awarded. And then again, your budget justification. You want to make sure it's no more than 5 pages. This, again, as Rita says, your best place to be transparent as well. Just if you have the room, put it on there. Make sure you are very precise, accurate, and detailed in regards to what the budget is and why. from salaries to equipment if it is allowed, all of that and all the details again. Look at your budget justification and make sure there may be no unanswered questions when it comes to that. Next slide. So a few do's and don'ts. We'll focus on the do's first. You want to communicate early and often with your grants office, several months before deadline. Make sure you heed the internal deadlines for your final documents. So again, that goes back to communication is key, making sure you work with the individual or individuals that your unit works with. Read the solicitation carefully. Work with your grants office too. Make sure they have a copy. Make sure that maybe they have questions for you. I'm sure this is not the first time they've done it, so they can provide some insight on any maybe obstacles they've run into in the past, or others that have submitted a solicitation similar and what they ran into or what they provided. You guys have a lot of resources out there from your peers to your research office, so maybe you won't have to reinvent the wheel for some of this stuff, and it would help you save some time on planning and efficiency. Make sure you and your institution are eligible. That's one of the things that you want to cover, because you don't want to put all this work in and then find out you're not eligible. That would be very frustrating for you, time wasted. So let's get all those details reviewed, make sure you're even eligible to apply for this solicitation. Is there a letter of intent or pre-proposal required? So what that means is, obviously, if your university or institution is eligible, if there's something previously that needs to be done prior to the proposal, and maybe it is a letter of intent, maybe it is a pre-proposal, which are usually short and to the point, but if it's required, that's something you want to make sure you get taken care of. And then, is it a limited submission? Limited submission means that there may be only 1 or 2 units or colleges at your institution that can apply, or maybe it's limited to 1. And is there a process at your institution that you have to where you guys would, the individuals will have to submit maybe a letter of intent or a pre-proposal that has to get reviewed and see if you get approved or permission to move forward with the solicitation. So there is a lot of stuff to review, and that is why you'll always hear us say to start early, sooner the better. Next slide. To continue on with the dues, make sure you review the budget minimum and maximum with the allowable cost. Is cost share matching required? Almost never, and voluntary cost share is prohibited with NSF, so just something to keep in mind, but you want to always look for that cost share verbiage. Required documents and their page limits. So, and be familiar with the proposal and award policies and procedures, the PAPPG. It covers formatting, page limits, what's allowable or required from each document, collaboration, information, and etc. So you want to just make sure that if it tells you to do Times Roman 12-point font, you're doing it in Times Roman 12-point font, because it's just something that can get you thrown out of the bucket, something simple for them to review and not even give you an opportunity. So you want to make sure to review all the documents, all the page limits, and even margins, guidelines, font guidelines, etc. A lot of these solicitations are very, very detailed and very specific in what they're looking for. Next page. And then don't, again, for the several times that you heard this, don't procrastinate. We really, really, really encourage you all to start 3 or 4 months in advance of the deadline. It is something that you can, definitely, if you start that far ahead, essentially you'll ideally have enough time to get everything done without rushing. And then, of course, don't give up. Don't give up. Utilize your resources. Don't think that you can't meet the deadline. Don't hesitate to ask questions. I mean, the only way you can essentially learn and continue to do this is by trying and keep utilizing the expertise around you. And I would say just keep hammering away at it, so maybe you can eventually get all of this done, and then you yourself will come in with a process that works for you and your research center, and to make yourself successful and ideally get awarded. We are now open for questions, if anybody has any.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your presentations. And can Hamid and Rita, can you please unmute your microphones and cameras so we can actually go over the questions?
I did notice a question. It says, hello, are the PI and co-PI salary 2 summer months max for each person? How many individuals in the team can we request 2 person months? You are correct. That was a typo on our presentation, and I apologize for that. It is senior key personnel, and it is a max of 2 person months for the PI and anybody who is listed as senior key personnel. If you go over that 2 months max, you need to have a very good justification in your budget justification for that reason of going over the 2 months salary, because per the PA-PPG, which is the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide from NSF, they state NSF regards research as one of the normal functions of faculty members at institutions of higher education. Compensation for time normally spent on research within the term appointment is deemed to be included within the faculty member's regular organizational salary. So that's why they limit it to 2 months max, 2 person months max. So again, it's for senior key people, PI, co-PI, or anyone who's listed as senior key personnel. And if you're going to exceed that 2 months max, please have a good justification ready for that.
The next
Yes.
question is related to the same information you mentioned. Is there a document to help us calculate person months?
Yes, there is. I have found online, it's a calculator. It's a Excel document, and I would be happy to share it. It's an Excel document. You plug in the percentage of time or the month's time, and it'll calculate the FTE out for you, or the person months, depending on what you need to list in your budget spreadsheet.
We will definitely appreciate if you can send it to us so we can actually post it in our portal.
Okay.
There's one more question in here. Do we need to know in advance the name of the companies we will hire for technology development or purchase of equipment?
For the purchase of equipment.
Rita, we don't hear you. Okay.
For the purchase of equipment, no, I have not found that to be required. If you have a quote, it's always good to have that quote that you can provide as documentation in your proposal. However, I have seen very oftentimes the equipment listed and the estimate of the cost. Of course, going back to what we discussed in the presentation, if they like your proposal, they're going to want to fund you. But if they have questions about your budget justification, those items are going to need to be cleared up prior to making an award. As far as what was that other question?
It is related to the 2 months max for the life of the grant, or is it 2 months per year?
2 months per year.
Great.
The other question was about, it sounded like maybe you're going to do a subcontract maybe to support technology along with that. And as long as you know on your budget that you're going to have a subcontract and have an estimate of what that would cost from that subcontract. To go back to Rita's point is if you have maybe a quote or a proposal from your subcontract, that would justify that as well.
Let me just read a question very similar. It says, are the 2 months limited to summer months only versus academic year months?
It can be calendar, it can be academic, and it can be summer. It depends on your appointment. Our presentation had summer, and I think that was geared toward a particular presentation that was done previously. However, it is 2 months max person months per year of the project. So year 1, 2 months, year 2, 2 months, year 3, 2 months.
Okay, thank you. One question here, my institution has an approved indirect rate of 40%. Is it possible for us to use only 10% indirect cost so more funds are used for direct services of the program?
Unfortunately, no, because NSF considers that voluntary cost share. They will come back and tell you, you can't do that. I've had that experience before. So while an institution has that ability to waive that IDC voluntarily, the way that NSF views it is that you are cost sharing, you are voluntarily cost sharing. And it is only a couple of solicitations for NSF that allow you to provide cost share, that require cost share. And otherwise they view it as voluntary cost share and they prohibit that. They will not allow it.
I think the next question is about the equipment. Is it best to add an official quote somewhere in the grant proposal?
Yes, if you have a quote, yes, I would list that and provide it in the document. Make sure with your solicitation, however, that they will allow you to provide additional information like that. Some RFPs, some solicitations are very specific, and anything extra in the proposal, they will cut it off either by page limit or just anything that they consider to be in excess of what is required, and it won't be reviewed, that particular page.
There's one question very similar. How much salary can be allocated to a project?
I would read your RFP carefully. Some federal sponsors have a limit on how much salary can be included. NSF, I have not seen that. Who knows if that's going to be something that they put into doing that in the future. I think by using that 2-person month limit, they are trying to keep salaries low because they consider that normal to your appointment. The activities that you would do on a sponsored project. However, you really should read your RFP to make sure if there is a limit on salaries.
That means that they could also talk to the program officer and find out that information.
Correct. And if you have any kind of question, and maybe your program officer isn't responding for whatever reason, they're just as busy as you, you can reach out to your research administrator or somebody like Hamid, who is a proposal development specialist and can tear that RFP apart and pick out all of the important things that you need to know.
If you are including an administrator salary, how is the time calculated?
So I have a question in answering that question. Does that mean an administrator like us, like myself? Or
I think it's a 12-month contract, is that right? Or maybe that could be possible.
I don't know. No, I think it means like a
We are talking about we are trying to figure out in here. It could be maybe an associate dean. That could be another possibility, or a dean. Can the person who wrote this question, can this person clarify this this question, please? Adin. Yes.
Oh, a dean. And can we repeat the question, Dr. Valles?
So they said that how is it calculated, the administrator salary? To include it in the proposal budget.
So I think that a cost like that for a dean, I'm going to be under the impression that that person probably has a high salary. And I would tread lightly with using somebody like that in a proposal, or charging salary to your proposal for a person in a high level position with a high salary, because that will eat up a lot of your budget. It's a good thing that NSF has that 2-person month limit. However, that budget calculator that I provide to Dr. Valles, that will kind of help. And anything else that I can provide that will help you to determine that salary, I will provide that.
Thank you. There's one more question in here. From experience to be successful in the research aims, as well as mentoring your research students, is it better to budget for faculty summer salary or buy out class time for high teaching load? Do grant reviewers have concern if you budget for both scenarios? I think we don't hear you well, Rita.
I was reading the question.
Oh.
I traditionally see faculty summer salary for the project. I have seen course buyout with NMSU. There is a particular process that you have to go through for course buyout. So I'm more familiar with utilizing summer salary. I have not seen a scenario where both are used myself. It's usually one or the other. I think that if you were in a situation where you wanted to do both, that would be a good question for starting within your university, either your college or your central admin office, and also your program officer, to see if their feelings on that.
Thank you. If the person serving as a co-PI and as a researcher, NSF does not allow you to keep them as co-PI or PI if you do not insert some salary, even $100. I mean, I think that's a statement, not a question. Said, if the person serving as a co-PI and is a researcher, NSF does not allow you to keep them as a co-PI or PI if you do not insert some salary, even $100.
So my experience with the budget forms, if a person is listed as a co-PI or a PI, but they're not going to take any salary on the project, they cannot be listed in the actual budget document. That avoids any confusion. Instead of having Dr. Hamid Mansouri Rad and $0 associated with his effort on the project, we take out his name completely from the budget document only, because he will not be charging any salary to the project. Fastlane has a section where you can list all of your co-PIs, and it has another section where if they are not going to receive salary on the project, you can remove them from the actual budget document. So if you include somebody in there in your budget document, I think that's what you're alluding to, is that, yes, they want to see some type of salary being charged to the project for that person.
There's one last comment from Dr. Hernandez. Funding for administrators depends on the role and the time allocation. In addition, it should be noted that administrators are usually appointed at 100% for administration. How that person will contribute to the grant in excess of 100% needs to be addressed. Finally, it is important to provide a persuasive justification for the contribution of that person in your budget justification.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So there are a couple of more questions in here, and the question is related to, can you please talk a little bit about the participant support where IDC is not charged?
So participant support costs are referring to, say your proposal is going to support students that are going to come to your university and attend trainings and workshops. They're going to live on campus. You're going to provide housing for them. You're going to provide food for them while they're at your institution. Maybe it's a 5-week course. So you're going to house them in the dorms. You're going to give them a meal plan at your university's restaurants or cafeteria. You're going to provide them workshop booklets, supplies. You're going to maybe take them on excursions related to the project. Those are participant support costs, and they will not assess IDC. So whatever your institution's indirect cost rate is, IDC will not be charged on participant support costs. So let's fast forward and your proposal gets funded. When your proposal is funded, most institutions, what they will do, because you have a situation where you have some costs that assess IDC and you have some costs that do not assess IDC. What's going to happen is when your award is set up, you're going to have 2 different account numbers. You're going to have an account number for the administrative program costs, and then you're going to have an account or index for the participant support costs, which has 0 IDC on it. It's a good way for institutions on the financial side to be able to track the IDC and to keep those costs separate, to make sure that no indirect costs are assessed on the participant support cost piece.
The same question related to what would be best or the better way to handle a student when you hire undergraduate students. Either you hire them or you give them a stipend for participating on the project. What do you think about these 2 things? A stipend versus a students hiring undergraduate students.
So I think that at my institution, my vice president for research, he wants to see graduate students hired. He wants
But what
to
about
see
undergraduate students?
Undergraduate students. I would say that that's the same philosophy. You want to see those students be hired and receive that compensation and credit for working on that project. I see very often the point of a stipend and giving them a portion of the funds, but I think that it's much more valuable experience for that student, undergraduate or graduate, to work on the project and be hired.
Great, thank you. There's one more question. Is it possible for somebody in an administrative position who has a full workload to contribute as key personnel after work hours and be compensated through some sort of bonus?
So to me, what that refers to is supplemental compensation, which means that you are 100% on your effort at the university. Being 100% effort at your university and then doing something like what is being proposed requires some additional questions, some criteria to be met. You have to be able to, according to 2 CFR 200, you have to be able to show that the work is crossing departmental lines. So say the lead PI is in geology and you are in engineering. The work you're doing in engineering, you're an expert, and it's going to cross departmental lines into that other department for geology for you to share your expertise. So it's crossing departmental lines. It's going above and beyond your normal appointment. Say you will be working after hours. Say you're traveling across the state on weekends to provide workshops. So that is going above and beyond. Or it's at a off-campus location, a rural, remote, or an off-campus location. So that criteria has to be met to show supplemental compensation. And I know for certain, your institutions have certain requirements for requesting supplemental compensation. I will say that your budget justification needs to clearly state that it is supplemental compensation.
Thank you. We have more questions, so we are actually considering if we go above the time. I think we are going to read at least 2 more questions in here. So what is the rule to pay collaborators from other universities?
What is the rule to pay other collaborators from other universities? So the way that I interpret that is that they will be a subcontractor. If that's incorrect, if you would let us know, you would list that subcontractor in your proposal. And if Barbara, if you want to jump in, because I feel like I'm doing all the talking, but you would list that subaward in your proposal, and you would list that person's salary in there. And if it's NSF, please keep in mind the 2 person months limit.
I think we have one important question in here that we personally have experience with subcontracts. Do you want to stay yet? Oh.
I just thought maybe you could comment a little bit on the importance of getting the official rates well in advance from your subcontractors. So what is their fringe rates and what are their IDCs? And that's just based on a recent experience I had where they gave me the rates. And then I found out at the last minute they actually weren't the correct rates, and it just created a lot of hassle.
So universities traditionally will have a negotiated indirect cost rate, which is an agreement that you make with the federal government, saying that they are your federal cognizant agency and they are going to oversee the work that you do as it relates to the federal government. NMSU's federal cognizant agency is the Office of Naval Research, and each year we negotiate with ONR to develop the indirect cost rate and the fringe benefit rates. So that is a real document that each institution will have. And if you are going to have subcontractors, I think what would be easiest is to have your research administrator, either at the college level or your central admin level, contact the subcontracting institution and have those 2 counterparts talk and ask for that indirect cost rate, the most recent one that they have on file, so that you have the correct IDC and fringe rates available.
Thank you. I think one quick question in the last one. Besides that, starting early, working on the proposal, and some people don't do that, like you mentioned, 2 weeks in advance, and it should be a longer time. What are the other biggest mistakes that normally faculty do or PIs do when submitting proposals?
I'm gonna let my colleagues answer first, and then I'll chime in.
I would say probably not, when it comes to budget, not getting proper quotes, especially in writing. Because if you get a quote or talk to someone over the phone and they tell you one thing and then you don't get that in writing, and then I guess similar situation like with the fringe, like they can come back and say, no, that wasn't, that wasn't correct. And if you do get a quote in writing, how long is it valid for? because it also could come back and affect your budget tremendously. Hamid, do you have anything else?
Well, it's not budget related, but I can see that sometimes PIs rely on collaboration of a friend or a colleague in another institution. And then they get a yes, for example, a positive answer, but they don't realize that, for example, that person is not going to be available, during the preparation of the proposal. And that creates a lot of hassle. So what I would recommend is to ensure that they are available for, to contribute to the proposal, not just say, yeah, I'm okay with it, just tell me what to do. No, we need more information that just, tell me what to do. I've seen a lot of these things where, the person is not available, the person in the budget office of that university is not available, so it creates a lot of hassle.
Rita?
Take, for example, you have a proposal that is going to be very large and you have a number of subcontractors, and the lead PI for the entire project is reluctant or has the inability to make a decision as far as budget, as far as how the work is going to be.
It's not that NMSU. It's not that NMSU.
No, never.
No.
So the ability to make a decision and stick to that decision, to me, makes everybody's life easier. You are the lead PI, and take that by the reins and go with it. Make the decisions that are best for the project as you see it. Of course, there's always flexibility. There's always room to change the plan, but the ability to make decisions and follow through with them is very important. If you have a proposal that's due and then you're going to be out of town and nobody can get a hold of you, that is pretty much a recipe for something's going to go wrong with your proposal, because we need to get a hold of you and nobody knows where you are. You're out in the field, you don't have your cell phone with you, you're in the middle of a flight. Please be available when your proposal is going to be submitted. If you have travel or you need to be in the field, try and submit your proposal early so that you can be available when it will be submitted. And then I think my last one would be keeping back your project narrative till the last minute. I have had the experience where a PI wanted to work on the proposal until 4:45 and it was due until 5. And my response was, yes, you can. I'm not going to tell you you can't. I understand how you feel about it. But if I can't submit it, I didn't get it. It's more than just hitting go. It's more than just hitting the submit button. It's making sure that you've met the page limitations rather. It's making sure that it uploaded correctly. If I am given 15 minutes, obviously all I can do is hit submit, upload the proposal and go. But keeping that back to the last second so that you can make sure that everything is the way you want it, that's a dangerous thing to do. So give your folks plenty of time to help you be successful.
We really appreciate it. There are a couple of more questions that we are going to answer in the portal, and unfortunately we didn't have enough time for this to answer them right now. And we really appreciate your participation today, and thank you to the speakers and then your valuable contributions to these webinars. And then we also remind everybody to answer Dr. Cristina Velez's email about a very, very short survey monkey and answer the questions we have in there. They are very important for us, get your feedback and do the reporting at NSF. So we really appreciate your time, and we will get back to you, to the speakers later by a follow-up, and we really thank you for that. So that will be all for today, and we'll expect to see everybody and all the attendees next week. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Bye.